So what inspired me to get into photography goes way back to when I was 11 years old. My father went on a business trip to the Bahamas. He came back with this Konica 35mm camera, and I took it my mission to learn how to use it because I'd been a Polaroid camera person up until that point. And then that started the inspiration. I got into photography, I practiced, I shot, I asked questions, I read books. I got in the yearbook staff in high school, and I kept developing from there. My style of photography has really developed not only from the technology standpoint, because I go from film to digital now to AI, but also I started out wanting to be a food photographer. And then that kind of went into corporate photography, which went into weddings, which went into being a life photographer, photographing people from weddings to maternity to newborn to families for year after year after year. So that has developed. So there's sort of a portrait side of the business and a commercial side of the business. My dad was not a photographer, and actually nobody in my family had one creative bone at all of any type. Not photography, not music, nothing. So I don't know how I got the bug of photography. My grandfather, however, he actually liked to take pictures, and he had a lot of old, great-looking black and white images he had shot when he was very young. So as a kid, the very first picture I remember that stands out in my mind is I really got into doing double exposures. I love double exposures. I remember taking a picture of a rose and then taking a picture of my brother, and I thought it was so cool seeing all the rose petals coming out of his head like he was some kind of alien. So I like experimenting. And then I got into my waterfall phase, photographing waterfalls. I went everywhere I could find out the waterfalls, and I started doing covered bridges, and I started doing lighthouses. So I got into a lot of nature scenic images. So it's kind of interesting that now I do a lot of photograph people and architecture, but that's where it started. So I think my signature style is dramatic images with off-camera lighting or real dramatic light. I really like lighting. I'm drawn to lighting, even if it's outdoors. You know, if there was a thunderstorm that opened up and there was a little beam of light coming through, I'd want to put my subject into that beam of light because I like the dramatic lighting. When I'm doing studio lighting, I'm going for that real dramatic look. If I'm outdoors, often I'm using off-camera flashes and more pinpointed light sources to make it real dramatic. So I think my style, no matter what subject matter you would see, would be real dramatic lighting and a little more saturated colors, not really the light and airy look that a lot of people are doing. So the type of photography I specialize in, I have a commercial end of the business, and I've specialized in architecture / corporate photography. So the corporate photography, what I mean is like anything a company needs to promote their business, from business headshots to personal branding to anything that tells a story of who they are. On the portrait world, I kind of consider myself a luxury portrait photographer. I'm looking for people that are, photography is very important to them, and I like telling a story about someone. You know, if it's a high school senior, I'm trying to find out everything about them and doing a photo shoot about who they are. If it's a maternity shoot, it's very similar, but I'm also putting in my dramatic lighting kind of style, but I'm trying to kind of create stories. You know, what I really like doing is I like traveling, and when I go somewhere, even if it's on an assignment, is just staying somewhere and just walking and looking for images, almost like I'm on a safari. That's why I call my photography workshops a photo safari, because I really like just walking, looking for something that just stands out to me. Sometimes it's something graphic and composition-wise. Sometimes it's lighting. It may be an old fisherman on the end of a wharf at sunrise. I mean, I'm just drawn into whatever captures my eye. So a good photograph to me is something that sort of speaks to you. I mean, I'm drawn to black and white images. I love black and white because they're timeless, but then also love real saturated, dramatic lighting. But I'm looking for something that jumps out at me in some aspect. It doesn't really matter if it's photographing wildlife or people or architecture, but I'm looking for something unique and creative. That's what draws to me has been a really good image. You know, one of my clients, you know, recently actually hired me and says, well, I hired you because I wanted to find a photographer that could take pictures that we can't take pictures with our phones. So I'm wanting something that stands out. So that's what draws me to people in images too. I mean, I do evaluate composition and lighting when I see an image, but it's almost like it speaks to me, and it's hard to put my finger on it exactly. Sometimes it varies from one subject matter to the another, but creativity, you know, the whole world's not eye level with a picture in the center of the frame. So I love exploring and trying to capture things in unique composition. So some of the most memorable projects and subjects I've photographed, you know, one comes to mind where it started with my photography workshop business, where I had someone come and take a private workshop from me that was a long-time NFL player. And then after the workshop, he took another workshop and took another workshop. Then he asked me, would I want to do a book with him? Because he actually knows all these Hall of Fame NFL players, and he wanted to do a book about who they are now off the field. So we spent like 2 years going around the country photographing these Hall of Fame NFL players. And it was kind of the whole style of photography I'm used to doing. We're telling a story about who they are. And so it was very, you know, unique because some of them were about their family. Some of them were in a professional football stadium, but it was all about who they are and what they do now. That one really stands out. Some other ones is I really do a lot of underwater photography. And how it started is I was in Las Vegas at a photography convention, and there was photographers speaking that had just did an underwater shoot for Sony, and he'd photographed all these ballerinas underwater. And I just thought that was so cool. So I rented an underwater camera, housing, and I found a model who just happened to be pregnant that would just model for me. And I did all these underwater shots inspired by that ballerina shoot for Sony. And then I put it on Pinterest and the power of social media. Never thought I'd ever be a maternity photographer, but all of a sudden I put it on Pinterest, and all of a sudden all these women started calling and wanted to do something underwater maternity shoot. And that's how it drew me into underwater. So it's definitely challenging trying to balance creativity and the demand of the industry. So for one, sometimes on the commercial end, you have clients that want you to do something that as a creative artist, you think is kind of more boring. But you know, you got to do what the client wants and needs. But what I've always tried to do is give the client what they're asking for, but then do something that I want to do also. And oftentimes the client ends up choosing what I came up with. But I have to give them what they're looking for because they're the one writing the check. But yeah, the industry has changed so much. So you have the developing industry that went from film to digital to now AI, and then you have the demands of clients, and it could be on the consumer end. You know, the consumer end, again, it could be a maternity client that wants to do something standing by a window holding her belly, which I'm thinking, oh my God, that's been done a million times. But that's what she wants, I'm gonna do it. But then I'll say, hey, I have another idea, you know, and so then I'm trying to do things I like, or they'll send me images that they've seen that are not really very good photography, that's flat lighting and very boring looking. So I'll then do something similar but with really great lighting. What I like to do is when people send me images, use it for inspiration and not try to completely copy the image. I want to put my own style to it. So the equipment that I use is Nikon. However, I look at it as a photographer is an artist and the camera's your brush. You know, regardless if you're shooting with Nikon or Canon or Sony or Fuji, you know, you might start off with something and then you start building this system of cameras and lenses. It's hard financially to jump ship to a different camera because you got so much invested in it. So you kind of embrace that, and all the major camera companies are very good. I've been shooting Nikon my whole life, and that's what I'm still shooting. Who knows what I'm gonna do in the future, because with all the new mirrorless cameras, you know, and I've been tempted to kind of shift toward the Fuji mirrorless medium format camera, for example. But I don't know what I'm gonna do in the future, but I've been a Nikon shooter, but any type of camera, it's more your eye. Like someone said one time, the best camera is a camera you have with you. So sometimes the best camera is your iPhone or your Android or some smartphone, because that's what you have with you, and you see this moment, you see this light, you see this image, and you capture it. So some lessons I've learned that I wish I had done something differently. When I first started out, I went to a photography school in Santa Barbara. It was all focused on photography. You had to take some academic courses too, and you had to have a year of academic college before you went there. What I really wish is I would have took a lot of marketing courses and sales course. Because, you can be the greatest photographer in the world, but if you're a terrible business person, very likely you might go broke. There's a lot of really good business people that are not really good photographers that are actually very successful. So I would recommend to people, don't forget marketing and sales. Those are so important, and that's where I wish I would have focused more on back in my college years. And as, you develop into photography, you can always do workshops and classes and still fine tune those skills. But, a photographer, you wear lots of hats. And photography is only part of it. I think it's like 10% of it, so you gotta be a great marketer, you gotta be good in accounting, you gotta be good in sales. I mean, there's a lot of hats you gotta wear. You gotta have really good people skills. That's if you're working for yourself, so I recommend not forgetting the business side. So social media has definitely influenced myself and many photographers. For one, Instagram is like an online portfolio. I have mixed feelings on social media, I guess being the older photographer. I know a lot of people put everything into social media. I look at everything as a way to drive traffic to my website. So I'm using that social media as a stepping, not as the final place to track client. So I want someone, maybe they will see an image, say on Instagram or Facebook, and then they go from there to my website, because my website is where I have a lot more images, a lot more text, a lot more content, and it tells a lot more about what I do. LinkedIn is where I tend to go toward commercial photography. Instagram is where I go more for my consumer photography, like the portrait world. And then, Facebook is a place where I can share some content along with the images as well. But the social media, some people live by it. I tend to be more of a higher end photographer on the price range, and I'm not saying the social media platforms do not find higher end people, but I haven't found that to be the case. I feel like I gotta be there and I wanna have it, but I am not a person that feels like I gotta post 3 times a day on different platforms and try to focus on different time zones and that. And I look at it as an online portfolio to drive traffic to my website. So the advice I would give aspiring photographers who's trying to establish himself, part of it will vary based on what type of photography they want to specialize in. But for me, what's more important than social media is relationships. I think it's very important to build relationship. And so alliances with other businesses, what you want to do is you got to identify who your ideal client is, and then find other companies that are going after the same type client and build relationships with those type companies. So you can refer each other, business. And then people like working with people they like. And so my advice is, as soon as someone emails you, get them on the phone. Stop this emailing back and forth, this whole electronic world, texting people, emailing people. It's all about a relationship. You've got to get them on the phone. You've got to talk with them, what I call discovery calls. You got to find out everything about what they're looking for and make a relationship. If not, you're just an Excel spreadsheet number. You got to build relationships. So you build a relationship with other photographers that's at a similar level you are, and you can refer each other work. When I've used books, you can refer the other one. Build a relationship with businesses that will refer work to you. Build a relationship with charities. Build relationships in your community. And it's the more you get involved, it's going to do so much more than posting on social media. Get out and get involved, build relationships. So a lot of the recognition I've gotten from awards and magazine, it's always nice for anybody to be recognized. But I think what you do is, the old saying, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. So if you put your heart into whatever you do, no matter what kind of business it is, then it will actually, bring a spotlight on you. But every one of my shoots, actually, I try to make it like it's a magazine shoot. So when I talk to clients, I treat every client like they're the top, highest end client there is. I'll talk to them about who they are, what we're trying to accomplish. We'll spend a lot of time figuring out the style of photography we want to create for their image. Do we need a hair and makeup artist? We'll talk about clothing, talk about locations. And so I treat every client like I was hired for a magazine actually to do that shoot. And so yes, sometimes I get recognized. There was times when I shot weddings that I got recognized a lot in weddings, mainly because I would talk to wedding clients, and then after I did the wedding, I would take the images and I would submit them to magazines, and I would actually write the story for the magazine. And I would give them a list of all the vendors, everybody had anything to do with that wedding. So the magazine, everything was laid right out for them, as long as they loved this wedding, So there's ways you can be proactive if you want to get published. Yes, you can enter all kinds of competitions and so forth. But really, my recognition I like the best is when, you have clients that just love what you did and they're so excited. And that's why I'm not a photographer that just hands over people digital files on a flash drive. I want to see wall portraits hanging in people's homes. I want to create coffee table books. I want to see tangible products. I feel like I haven't completed what someone hired me to do when I just shoot the job and hand them images. I do give clients images, but I want to see finished products. And sometimes I do get recognized that in publications and awards, but it's the final client, what they think about it, what matters the most to me. So it's definitely a balance on work life / personal life. And so it's a different road for different people. So, when I started out, I was working all the time because I was doing weddings and portraits and commercial photography. And so what you got to do is, one aspect, you could definitely block off date. There's a lot of photographers, what they do is they charge premium rates for weekends. And so you have to pay more because, you're going to give up time with your family, then it's more valuable. What I've done is I've charged, it's supply and demand. So the busier I get, the more I charge. And as I get busier, I charge more and more. And that way I'm able to balance it out a little bit better, by instead of turning people down. However, when I do talk with clients, they're interviewing me, but I'm also interviewing them. I need to kind of get a feel that I think we're a good fit. So in the end, maybe there's sometimes I don't take a project just because I don't think it's going to be a great fit. But as far as the balance goes, there's some photography, if you do only studio photography, you got a lot more options to have a more balance, because you could say, okay, I only work between these hours and these hours. When you're shooting on location and the greatest light is early morning and late in the day, and it's, in the summer and the sun doesn't set to 9 o'clock, it becomes a more challenging, so you have to either block off days, or block off time during the week, take more vacations, or if you get overwhelmed, just raise your prices, and then you have less people and work, it's the whole, work smarter, not harder scenario is what I go for. The other thing I would like to encourage people to do is delegate. A lot of people get burnt out because they try to do everything themselves. How many successful companies can you think of that's a one-man shop? There might be a one-person owner, but you can't be everything. So delegate editing, delegate retouching, delegate designing. Learn to delegate, because that'll help you from getting yourself burnt out. Because in the beginning, you're trying to do it all because you're trying. And so when you're pricing things, you got to value your time. Don't get over there and not, you're never going to be able to afford to hire someone to do things for you if you never factor in what it would cost to hire somebody to do that for you into the pricing. So learn to delegate things, and then that'll help you a lot. In addition to delegating, create a team. Hey, I have a home office, but I have 2 designers, I have 2 retouchers. I have different people to different aspects of my business, so you can have freelance employees. I have many assistants, but they're all freelance, so you got to build a team, so when you go to do a project, you're not, again, doing everything yourself. So what I'm hoping my legacy will be as a photographer, there's 2 parts. Photography, what my goal has always been, like any great artist who has a certain style, and you look at a painting and say, oh, that's a Van Gogh. I love people to see it because I have this dramatic, saturated, certain look that people would be able to recognize my work without seeing my name on the image. But also, I love education and I love sharing knowledge. And so my future here is I'm trying to build an education platform, and I'm hoping with my legacy I will have lots of educational products and available videos and different educational platforms that people will be able to learn from. I love doing coaching with other photographers. I love doing workshops because there's no pressure of getting something delivered to the client on a certain time frame. I can actually share knowledge with aspiring photographers.